It's, sorry. Okay, so we will start with the first point, which is a video message by our president, Mrs. Emma Osmondson, the president of YMCA Europe. And she couldn't be here tonight, but she prepared a short video message. So please, Emma.
Greetings and welcome to this online Planetary Health Conference. It is a pleasure for YMCA Europe to organise and host this event. And on behalf of our Executive Committee and staff, I thank you for your participation. I want to especially share our gratitude to Richard Schweizer for his leadership, together with the rest of the planning team, including Lucas and Jonas, and all the outstanding speakers at this event. Your work and passion for environmental issues is truly relevant to YMCA Europe and our global movement. 6 months ago, the YMCA unanimously adopted our Vision 2030 as a strategy that will guide our journey in the next years. We collectively identified 4 key areas of activity which will become priorities at our local, national and international levels. These are community well-being, meaningful work, just world and sustainable planet. This conference focuses on the 4th and crucial pillar, sustainable planet. The YMCA believes that all of us shall commit and take action for the protection of our planet. And YMCA Europe wants to play an active role by raising its voice on climate justice, promoting a just transition where humans live in harmony with nature. This strategic priority will be visible in all our programmes and events, such as our forthcoming 50th anniversary celebration in Berlin this summer. Here we will focus on the Sustainable Planet strategic pillar as part of our programming, involving more than 500 young people from across Europe. We are deeply inspired by your personal commitment and the involvement of the YMCAs that you represent at this conference. We look forward to the outcomes of your presentations and discussions, identifying new project initiatives that we can implement at all levels. More than ever, our action is needed. The health of our planet is our collective responsibility. So I wish you all a good conference.
Thank you, and we will now directly head on to a next speech by the General Secretary of YMCA Europe, Juan Simões Iglesias. It's very nice that you could take your time and to speak to us. Juan, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Richard. Richard is a member of our executive committee, and therefore we work very closely together. In fact, we have a meeting early tomorrow morning of our executive committee, so it's great to see you twice in a row today and tomorrow. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to the planning team. Thank you for all of you participating, and to your national movements for creating the spaces for you to be relevantly working in a sustainable world, a sustainable planet. And this conference comes, as Emma was mentioning, in a timely moment. And I want to especially thank you, Patricia Pelton, immediate past president of World YMCA, who initiated actually the dialogue and discussion in order to adopt unanimously Vision 2030 just a few months ago in the World Council in July in Aarhus, Denmark. Patricia, together with World Alliance Secretary General Carlos Sanve and an enormous group of leaders from the movement across the world, were able to shape what we call now and are implementing Vision 2030 with a very special focus on sustainable planning. So this conference comes, and it's actually the first event in Europe that one of the national movements develops, in this case, our friends from the movement in Switzerland, on events on a focus on this particular topic. Environmental education and the worry for climate is obviously a responsibility. It's an individual responsibility, but it's especially as YMCA and YWCA in institutional responsibilities. And it shall embed, we shall encourage all of our local and national movements to really include in their strategies at their local and national levels aspects related with a more healthy planet according to their possibilities, but also according to their strategic plans. This is something that is not a worry for the future. It's something that we need to worry. Today, we feel that we lost decades without strong focus in this field. And I'm sure the speakers, the outstanding speakers that you have gathered this afternoon are going to mention these very specifically. The journey that humanity has gone through to come to a level in which sensitive approach this topic is crucial. I was just here for a number of events here in Lisbon, in Portugal, with the YMCA. And yesterday, we visited outstanding project just outside Lisbon in the edge of the river Tagus. And it's an example on how the public sector, the private sector, and the social sector, like the YMCA, can be involved in recovering a very damaged part of the city, which was industrialized for decades, and that due to the combined efforts of these three levels of society, these three partners in society, the government, local and regional, the business sector, and non-profit organizations were able to recover as a service for young people through employment. So a number of startups that were able to be built in this area that was extremely damaged during decades due to a very bad planned industrial area in the city, and it was overwhelmed to see how this was clearly recovered in every aspect you can imagine, from the environmental point of view, from bringing new neighbors into the area. It's a wonderful area which you can see the whole city of Lisbon from the other side of the river, but also an area that is providing job opportunities to young people in the city and in the region. That's an example of how we, as activists in the non-profit, in the social sector, have a responsibility also of encouraging the governments and the private institutions to take action collectively with us. We are not asking for heroes, we're asking for cooperation to reach the levels that we can reach all together in order to change the negative situations that we see in our neighborhoods and in our countries. The YMCA is proud to be the first institution that really thought about camps as an educational activity in the environment, which young people and children from urban contexts and villages will leave the city and spend a few days in the countryside, being totally embedded on the privileges of being in that context, but also understanding and respecting the environment. I think we need to not only be proud of that historic fact, but also be able to continue developing projects that combine urban activities with environmental activities in the countryside that create impact, and being able to reflect that in our daily programs. We have the capacity of shaping our projects, our strategies in the format that in every single element of those, we are able to speak about environment and the danger that we see around us. The global population has grown and continues growing in the last 100 years, 5 times more than in the whole history of humankind. And this means that there's excellent achievements. At the same time, it means also responsibility for all of us working with the population, governments, and institutions to make sure that they not only have a safe space and a future in their spaces, but they are also sensitive to the fact that all of us shall take care of our own environment. We can speak about many more things. I will refer again to Vision 2030 as a frame that can inspire and guide actions. I would really encourage to be participatory as much as possible within the pillars of Vision 2030. and within your own responsibilities in the movements as volunteers or as members of staff. Thank you on behalf of our team, and again, congratulations for this initiative to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Juan. We will now head on to the first highlight of this conference. Christian Abshagen, he's a scientific expert on planetary health, and he will now introduce the concept to us and also talk about various aspects and related implications. Dr. Abshagen is a researcher at the University of Applied Science in northwestern Switzerland and head of the CAS on Health and Environment. He is also the head of sustainability at the University Hospital of Basel. Dr. Abshagen, the digital floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure and honor that you're having me here. Really cool to see so many dedicated, motivated people of all ages, I would say, predominantly young. Yeah, it's the spirit we need. Yes, I don't have to add much about my person. I'm a medical doctor by training. I've done different things in my life. During the past 5 years, I'm investing myself heavily in sustainability, sustainable healthcare, and planetary health. So I have the pleasure as well as to integrate this meta-planetary health and sustainability and healthcare in the medical curriculum of the University of Basel as well. And I've brought with me really a basic presentation on planetary health. It's always difficult to judge what is the level of knowledge, and yeah, Mr. Iglesias gave me quite a good head start with this the last 150 years, which you will see in my slides at the start. I guess we have some time of discussion afterwards, so yeah, maybe gather your questions, and so I will start share my screen. So now you should see in the presentation mode, I guess. Okay, yeah, thanks, Lucas, for nodding. Yeah, got you. Okay, this, our beautiful blue planet, the only one we have, is about 4.5 billion years of age now. And about 300,000 years ago, we as Homo sapiens entered the stage. So if you think of the Earth span of life as 1 day, 24 hours, then mankind joined this planet like for the last 4 seconds of its existence. Basic life has been there much longer, about 500 million years, that we have higher forms of life, but Homo sapiens as we know, 300,000 years. And then we strolled around this planet for gathering and hunting for almost the same amount of time until 10,000, 12,000 years ago, when we settled down and gave up hunting and gathering for starting agriculture and forming the settlements and the societies we know now from. So in this span of 24 hours a day, this sums up to the tiny fraction of 2 milliseconds that we are really living the way that we. And this probably happened because we entered a stage and a phase, Earth time, called Holocene, where temperature suddenly and miraculously became quite stable, and that enabled us, many researchers say, only to seed out seeds, to grow plants and to start with agriculture. And then within the last 200 years, 150 years, this was what Mr. Iglesias already said, something extraordinary happened. in the last 150 years, the population increased sevenfold, but even more impressively, the economic output per person on Earth increased even 11-fold at that time. And if you combine those two those two trends, you get a curve that is so steep you can't imagine. And we humans are bad in really grasping and imagining exponential growth. And to me, it was so striking when we had this Corona epidemics, because for the first time, if you work in a hospital, you really could live and experience exponential growth from one first patient entering the emergency floor, next day 2 to 3 to 4, day after 8, 10, and a few days later you had 60, 70, 100 patients with Corona. This was, I think, the first time for many of us to really experience exponential growth, and it's just impressive that we live in such an economic growth. There have been great effects to it. In the same time, the childhood mortality went down, the illiteracy rate went down, the life experience increased at the same stage, and we continue to conquer the planet, which was seen with all socioeconomic trends, be it energy use, water use, damming of the rivers, all those curves really rising steeply from after World War II. And well, if you look a bit into the future, then one can assume that that this trend would continue. In 2020, there's the graph and the bad quality to the left. But in 2020, this was the year when the man-made mass, like metal, steel, cement, all the roads we construct, the bridges we build, equaled the biomass of the Earth. And it's to be said that by 2040, this mass should triple. It's almost not imaginable. Maybe with our meat consumption to the right, sorry for being in German, this slide, it's not as exponential anymore, but still there from 2005 to 2050, all more increase to be predicted. And as we now realize and know, this comes with a cost, because those socioeconomic trends have their reflection or direct imprint in Earth system trends, which you see, of course, in the so much discussed greenhouse gases, CO2, methane as well, and so on, but also in the ocean acidification, which goes with it, but also with the nitrogen entry from agriculture, the forest loss, and so on. Unfortunately, we see those steep rises there as well. And this brings us to a concept that is really key to planetary health, is the concept of planetary boundaries, which has been researched by a group headed by Will Steffen, an Australian guy, and Johan Rockström, a Swedish guy who now is the director of the Climate Institute in Potsdam. And they identified 9 Earth system processes which are decisive in keeping the Earth in a stable system. And they influence each other, and they can tip those tipping points, like best researched, of course, for climate change, melting oceans, the weakening of the jet stream, and so on. They are themselves no tipping points, but they are those supporting Earth systems. And Rockström and Steffen identified physical boundaries, space, a safe space and control variables for each of those Earth system processes to measure how far we have transgressed already the safe operating space or whether we are within. And this is the stage of 2020, 2022. Those boundaries are still refined, new control variables are added. Last year, we had a split, for instance, from freshwater use, separating blue water use. This is like the surface water from green water, the groundwater. So there's still work done on this concept. And as we see, those orange and red tranches, unfortunately, we have transgressed quite a few of those planetary boundaries. We speak much about climate change, and I will go on to climate change also a bit, but there are others as well. Biodiversity is coming into focus, but others which are still rarely discussed, novel entities, which means all the novel chemical substances we invent and bring into nature, all those nitrogen and phosphorus cycle from agriculture. And to a medical person or a health professional, this concept is so intuitive because it's a bit the same what we do in medicine. If a patient enters emergency room, first thing you do, you check his vital functions, and if those control variables, blood pressure, pulse, temperature, oxygen saturation are within a certain physiological range, you can relax, you go on calmly. But if 2 or 3 of them are heavily disturbed, you better scoop and run to the OR or where you can help them. And that's actually the same thing that this concept does. And of course, we all know best for climate change, it's the concentration for CO2 as control variable, where we are approaching now this upper limit of 450 ppm quite rapidly, and still without a change in direction, unfortunately. So up to now, this has been not much. This has been a bit the story of the planet. So the planetary in planetary health, but nothing about health. So what is the connection to health? Well, we know, and there again, we could now go over all those 9 boundaries and could spend for hours, which we won't do here, to elaborate on the connections of health. In 2021, 230 medical publications, the most renowned New England Journal of Medicine, Lancet, British Medical Journal, issued a joint statement, emergency call to limit climate change, restore biodiversity, to protect health. Because, as the Lancet already stated it in 2008, climate change is the greatest threat for human health in the 21st century. And depicted here are the interconnections, the multiple that climate change has on human health. And this is not exhaustive, and it's just throwing to your heads this broad aspects of acute direct effects of trauma, of weather disasters, to chronic effects like allergies, melanoma due to increased sun hours, from infectious diseases, zoonosis in combination with the biodiversity loss, but also vector-borne diseases with disease patterns that change, and the tiger mosquito arriving even here in Basel, and we got leaflets in our to warn people not to leave water on their balconies, because even here risks are increasing for transmission of dengue fever and so on. So all those disease pattern that moves, you have not only somatic, but you have psychiatry effects on it, chronic as well. People, maybe you've heard speaking on eco-anxiety, but you have of course all those post-traumatic disorders, and you have then climate change as a huge reason for migration, for political conflict, which again deteriorates health, the health of populations and puts them at risk. I've told you those boundaries are interconnected. Another boundary is on air pollution. Of course, air pollution mainly results from burning fossil fuels still, and we yearly have approximately 8 million deaths from air pollution, not only from lung diseases, but we know that air pollution increases the risk of even things like diabetes, that they increase the risk for stroke, for heart attack. So planetary health in its all it's much about system thinking and complexity thinking, and how those things are interconnected. And just to give a last example, and there are so many I can't even touch on. It's if you connect, of course, agriculture as we do it nowadays is a driver for climate change, for biodiversity loss. In itself, it poses health problems because the way we hold cattle and we raise increases antibiotic resistances, which makes it difficult to treat diseases then once we have patients in the hospital. So it's all interconnected, and the influences of those global man-made environmental changes on human health are really increasing and can't be neglected anymore. And that is what is planetary health about. This is like the one slide from the Planetary Health Alliance that is which was put up by Lancet and the Rockefeller Foundation in 2015. And planetary health is this scientific field, but also global movement. I will say a word on this just in a second. To understanding those impacts and developing solutions, so really get implementation oriented. Regarding there is I think one thing which is key, which is intriguing to me in planetary health, it's a different view, a different perspective regarding our relation to environment. It's not the Western style Descartes, this clear separation of mind and body, or humans and nature, but it's really this intertwined. And from medical science as well, all the science goes in direction the microbiome side, where we know that we need bacteria in our intestine for our immune system, where we know that environmental effects have genetic effects, that even our children can have gene alterations from environmental effects that the mother or father has experienced. So it's much more interwoven. And the a bit tragic thing is, this is not new knowledge. It's I think to a large extent it's old knowledge. Like here's this citation of Chief Seattle, but if you look to indigenous populations, many of them knew and know for ages and ages that all is interconnected, and maybe we have taken a bit the wrong route in this last 70 years here. And then planetary health is of course much about social and intergenerational justice. This blown up, puffy global south, huge Africa and India, and those really slim industrialized northern part of the world is just the correlation on the mortality already nowadays. You can read to the right. It's the mortality from 2000 to 2030 due to climate change, and the burden of disease is to be borne by the global south, who has not caused the problem, who is causing the problem. And this is really an important statement as well, because we at the very beginning we spoke about overpopulation, and of course population growth is a matter, but if we were only 5 billion people, or if we stop population growth now, at this tonight, this wouldn't solve the problem. You see here in those two charts that 1%, the richest 1% of the world's population is causing 15% of all CO2 emissions, whereas the poorest 50%, the poorest half of the world only causes 10%. The richest person, 1% of the world, person who belongs to that, has 48 tons of CO2 per year. The poorest person living in the poorest half of the world only 0.6 tons. So it is a question of justice in there. I don't have to go into this anymore. I think this puts it together. Planetary health is about the Anthropocene, the great acceleration and its connection to health. It's about equity and justice. It's of course about systems thinking and complexity. And it don't want to stay theoretic or only closing the knowledge gap, but it's movement building and really trying to transform the system. And there a different aspect comes to it, that much of what I told you now in the last minutes may sound frustrating, may sound like, oh my God, what can I do? The problem is so huge and the state is so dramatic or bad. And I think there is this great promise of planetary health as well, that we can really connect health and environment for a narrative, for having a really promising future and thinking things together. So one could say that, like, the changes towards renewable energies that we have to do, the changes in our nutrition system that we have to do, they're in the same time safeguarding our planet, but they are the greatest or most important health project as well as that we have. And if you see here, for instance, active mobility, it's all about those co-benefits that you do, that one does something good for its health, for the health of others even. If you say, for instance, air pollution, and that you do something good for environment. So even in Switzerland, the extra costs from fossil-based mobility, car mobility in Switzerland, every year what the society has to bear is 8 billion in addition, and the benefit from active mobility would be 1.5 billion that one could cash in from not diseases that you prevent and so on. And same for nutrition. We know all this hyper-processed food, red meat causing cancer, causing diabetes and so on. There is this planetary health diet where, again, I think this is very important. We can solve the problems we have even with 10 billion people on the earth. And this was this Lancet Eat Commission who came up with a planetary health diet that would fulfill or that would achieve to really nourish 10 billion people within the planetary boundaries, and with a food that is more healthy than it is nowadays. And I think this is the important aspect of planetary health as well, that there is this positive story in it to much extent. So as a summary, it is a field of science based on strong values. It wants to be impact driven and transformative. I'm looking forward to the next talk, but this has been quite an overview and rather theoretic to really get hand-on this transformative part. And we have to think, I think we have to acknowledge the complexity. We have to collaborate over disciplines, professions, generations, be inclusive, and then for closing, we know enough, but it's about implementing, and for that, imagination that helps to be motivated. Thanks a lot, and if there are questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Thank you very much for this very informative presentation. So as you said, there is the room for question now. I can say that, so following all presentations, there will be a general Q&A session. However, if there is a specific question to the talk of Mr. Abshagen, then this question can already be answered now. So feel free, if you have any questions to the presentation of Mr. Abshagen, please ask them now. Are there any such questions at the moment? Yes. So there is one. I think you should be able to talk now.
Thanks very much, Lucas and Richard, and thanks very much, Doctor. So the data seems so self-explanatory. Why is it that there's such a high proportion of the population that doesn't understand this and the crisis that we're in and willing to make change? And even in my own country in Canada, I see this faction of people that literally are denying that anything is happening. And what can we do to bring these people along? Thank you.
Thanks. Very, very important question. Yeah, as I said, as you know, repeated, in principle, one would say the data is there, the knowledge is around, so we can move on to the next step, or can be angry why it doesn't happen anything. Nevertheless, I just had a talk yesterday within our university hospital with our Department of Internal Medicine in a quite large auditorium. And again, I was struck how few people know the UN Sustainable Development Goals, where our sustainability strategy at the university hospital is built on. How few people, I let them raise their hand, know the concept of planetary boundaries, not to speak about something like a donut model of economics, also very, very valuable in that regard, but they are all academics. So there is a way, and we have to go out and preach and like politicians not stop saying. So maybe it's less the case here, or you are probably, but yeah, it's the multiplicator. So you can go on, and I'm always surprised because those people are not stupid, they all have their doctors, they read newsletters, and so I don't know. And then but when it then comes to implementation, of course, in part it's like in change management. Every time, like we are so good in wanting to stick to our old routines and I think therefore it is so important to have a positive narrative, to have something promising on the one hand, on the other hand to know some psychological facts which are playing against us, and there are just to cite two of them. One is the bystander syndrome. If there's an emergency and you are the only person to react, you react with a higher probability as when 6 people stand around and you think the other one could react. And that's a kind of a dilemma, because in this problem it needs all of us, and we think, oh, the other one will do something. And I think this is also difficult to have a good balance between. It would be not right to say, okay, if we as individual change completely and don't fly at all and don't own a car anymore, then the problem would be solved. Now we have to. This is one part, but it has to go beyond that. The other bit is the positivity bias. Many people thinking, and that again, unfortunately, in the rich north, I guess, they say, and they might be in part right, okay, it won't come this bad for me. So people overjudge, like if there's a bad event to come that makes them survive, also but they think they will be better off than they will be then empirically. So this, and then there is a power issue as well. I don't know whether you have seen, there was this World Economic Forum in Davos in Switzerland, which just finished. I really highly recommend to you. There was a 1-hour session on climate change where Johan Rockström's talked in the beginning, the guy with the planetary boundaries, who said, we don't have a climate crisis anymore, it's a planetary crisis, was the introduction, and then there was a panel. And there, in this panel, there was one native Indian American guy, a lady, highly impressive, just stating the things like every decision you should ask yourself, what is the effect 7 generations after. And then there was Bill, not Bill Gates, Al Gore, who you know, of course, as climate activist, and he put the finger in the wound, and he started quite calmly and really got furious. It's still a matter of power, and a matter of power of fossil industry regarding climate change and lobbying and so on, and therefore we need I don't know, everyone has to look for himself how far to go until civil disobedience, or how much Martin Luther, or how much Mahatma Gandhi. But I think at least pressure from society, from ordinary people. Even my job wouldn't exist if there hadn't been Health for Fridays for Future going down the streets in Basel a few years ago, because this really woke up some people in politics and so as well. So this has to continue. Sorry, it was rather a long answer, but
no, thank you. That's
Thank
great.
you very much.
Thank you very much. I see that there is a raised hand. Is it correct that Anne from YMCA Ireland wants to say something?
Yeah, I just have a question for you. Thank you so much for your presentation. I help with our chaplaincy program here in Ireland, and I'm curious about kind of the environmental side of the spiritual and mental health of people. So I don't know if you have much to say about that as an MD, but yeah, just curious of your thoughts around that and the connection of even being outside. And I live in Dublin, in a city, so you know there's not a lot of green space, and the effect on that in terms of mental and spiritual health as well.
Well, yes, I'm not a psychiatrist. It's not my specialty, I have to say. I have a great psychiatrist from the University of Heidelberg coming to our CAS program for lecturing a day on that. I guess what one can say, they did even a study with medical students on evaluating their eco-anxiety and solastalgie. Solastalgie is the grief you feel in the loss of an intact nature, be it by climate change or biodiversity and so on. And up to now, it's still in a continuum. It would be wrong to say those are already acknowledged psychiatric diseases or so, yeah. But what you apparently see is that those facts significantly raise a ground stress level, and this again is then of course brings you easier into a burnout or something like that, or into a depression. So it's not disease by itself, but it's kind of a risk factor, and I think we have to evaluate with the upcoming young generation in the next years. I think there is dynamic in this. And then on the other part, this is a field which is also not, there's much space for more research, but I feel it really coming is the benefits of environmental health. And there are, of course, like this forest bathing, or even in green spaces in a city, if you let people go for a walk for 15 minutes around a gray block of buildings, or even through a city park, you can measure that their cortisol level and so is different. And I guess that again is for a society and a population that is grown up rather in this, as I said, discard style and very rational. I think it needs such studies to prove that environment has a value for us. I think other societies knew this more intuitively. Would be my kind of answer.
Thank you.
Anna, you also had a question, is that correct?
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you for the presentation. It was really interesting. Yeah, I wanted to ask, you mentioned it a little bit in terms of the decision-making or the political level, and how far is planetary health kind of in the public or in the awareness of decision makers, for example, at COP27. And I know there's also a lot of youth representatives, even within YMCA, who are present at some conferences around sustainability and biodiversity and climate change. They could even maybe talk about those topics. What could they say to, or how could the kind of scientific side of planetary health and all the knowledge that is already available be connected more so that it becomes something more in the awareness of decision makers?
Yeah, it has to be. I don't have a satisfying answer there. Or I can go back to what I said, to the question before, that I'm somehow astounded how little this is common knowledge still. And yeah, I guess it's at least for me, for the first time to really see that in the medical studies, and so really much is driven by the students. Now in the medical curricula of Switzerland, we have 5 medical universities. 4 of them are now heavily in integrating it and really having them for the first time. And this is stepwise. Of course, you don't change the curriculum, and it's bits by bits. So there again, it takes 5 to 6 years until the first group of students go through the curriculum and has really planetary health from the first semester to the last. It's all time we don't have. But of course, I'm convinced because it combines science and social movement. That is really a strong point for politics. And then I can say again, if we want change, of course we have to try it on all levels and with all levers. To my opinion, often the old and classical institutions won't be, even if they understood it, won't be the one who drive change. So the Swiss Federation of medical doctors, for instance, their head is not only a medical doctor, but he's in a Green Party, and nevertheless, this federation is on the stance. Yes, it must be health in all policies, but it mustn't be environment in all policies. And I try to argue to them, planetary health, it is health, and it brings it with it. So I think, but there are good movements around, and really, I think a strong role that students play. There's this planetary health report card where they evaluate it's all medical studies focused, but from all over the world, to give grades to the curriculum, how much they integrate it, not only into education, but also in research, also in operation.
Thank you very much. If it's okay for you, there will be more place for questions at the end of the conference. So we will go on and continue with the speech of Natalie Niedens. But it's really nice that there are so many questions at the moment. That gives a great discussion, I guess. So Natalie Niedens will now give us a presentation on the practical implementation of the planetary health concept, using heat protection as an example. Natalie Niedens is a physician with a master's degree in public health and is currently pursuing a PhD in pediatric environmental medicine. She works as a scientific advisor for CLUG. CLUG is the German Alliance on Climate Change and Health. It's great to have you here. Please, Natalie, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having me. I'll just quickly share my screen. Yeah, so we've heard about the broader concept and the general concept of planetary health, and now we have the opportunity to delve a bit deeper into a practical example, namely the link between heat and health. As introduced by background, I'm a medical doctor, but I currently don't practice medicine. I direct all my efforts into, well, planetary health, basically. So to start, I'll just quickly say a few words about the NGO that I work for. So KLUG is the German Alliance on Climate Change and Health and was founded a few years ago. And it's basically a network of individual healthcare professionals, but also institutions and organizations from the health sector. And we not only see climate change as the biggest threat to human health, but also as the biggest opportunity, as Dr. Abshagen also highlighted in his talk, mentioning the co-benefits. And there are various fields that we're active in, carbon neutral hospitals, divestment, nutrition, also heat, even though heat is more of an adaptation issue, but I'll speak about that maybe in the end. And then we also have our activists from Health for Future. So, you know, local people that are active on the local level and can really be bold and push. There is an educational team that places the nexus of climate change and health into the professional development and training of healthcare workers with the Planetary Health Academy, but also with educational institutions. And then we also try to advocate on a political level, and more recently, a think tank was founded, the Center for Planetary Health Policy, that advises decision makers. So, heat. These are a few headlines from the past year, and we really saw major heat waves around the globe, really. In spring, there was a huge heat wave in Pakistan and India that not only threatened human health, animal health, but also led to water shortages, electricity shortages, affected agriculture. We saw a large heat wave in 2021 in Canada with record temperatures, blackouts, and these are not only freak odd events. Climate change makes them a lot more likely. And since I am German and work in Germany, I'm more familiar with the situation there. So little disclaimer, this is from a German lens, this entire talk. And what you can see here is the development of hot days, meaning days with temperatures of at least 30 degrees Celsius. In the 1950s, we saw on average 3 to 4 hot days in a year. And in the past decade, from 2011 to 2020, that number has almost tripled. And of course, there are some areas that are more affected and see up to over 20 hot days in a year. So climate change not only makes heat waves more often, they're also longer and hotter than they used to be. And really those really major events that we haven't seen yet can come. So who's at risk? It affects all of us. First of all, I personally know that if it's really hot, I don't feel super well. I don't feel very productive, not very energized. But there are certain populations that are more vulnerable than others. And that might be due to physiological reasons, as in elderly people or pregnant women or children. That might be because they have medical conditions that make them less able to adapt to heat. They might be more exposed to heat, like people who do stuff outdoors. But there's also a social dynamic to it. So the ones that are isolated, the ones that live in poorer conditions, that live in homes that heat up, that just are not also as informed about the risks of heat and what they can do. Those are really the ones that are vulnerable and need to be protected. So what happens inside the body? Our body can only work in a quite tight range of temperature. So when it gets hot, the body tries to cool down, and mainly through two mechanisms: sweating and the widening of blood vessels in the skin. And that's physiological, that's normal, but that can also have negative consequences and can also reach its limits. So we lose a lot of water, we lose salts. The blood flow is redistributed to the skin. That means that other organs aren't as well perfused as they are supposed to. Our heart has to work really, really hard, and that can lead to heat illnesses. And heat illnesses are really a spectrum. So they can be quite mild, like muscle cramps, people can faint, but they can also be very severe. In the most severe case, a heat stroke can occur where the entire organ shut down, you can fall into a coma, and you can eventually die. So in the most extreme way, heat can also be a killer. And what we do see is that the number of people dying in relation to heat are increasing. In the graph here, we see the percentage change of heat-related deaths among the elderly. only for European region, but it's the same across other regions in the world as well. It is increasing, and here we see a 22% increase compared to the baseline of 2000 to 2004. And last summer, only in Western Europe, over 20,000 deaths have been estimated. And this is only for a few countries, so we don't even know the full extent. Interestingly, heat strokes aren't the major contributor to heat-related deaths. It's other medical conditions, because heat really can affect the entire body, almost all the organs. It can increase the risk for heart attacks, strokes, mental health. People get more aggressive. People feel psychiatric diseases. You're more at risk. Suicides also increase, because we just spoke about mental health. Lung diseases worsen, and there's also an interconnection between heat and pollution. So like a double burden, once again, kidneys, pregnant women. So really, really a broad range of health outcomes. So the question is, what can we do? Looking at that enormous threat to our health, we need to prepare. And one way to prepare are heat health action plans. Heat health action plans are basically protocols issued by a government on a national, regional, or global level, or local level, that address the measures that you can take to prepare in a city or in a region. And on the right-hand side, you can see the various timeframes that plans like these address. So you need to have specific responses to a heat wave. So the acute response, you need to do something during the summer in preparation, but also the long-term development and planning aspect. So this usually addresses urban planning and how we construct and build our, environments really. And because I mentioned earlier, it's more of an adaptation issue. I feel like mitigation comes into this long-term strategy as well, of course, because if we do not change the way that we consume, the way that we, our economy works, the way that we live, it will only get hotter and hotter. And there is a certain limit of adaptation. We can't just indefinitely adapt. So mitigation is actually quite an important point also in heat protection. So heat health action plans are one of the aspects, but we need warning systems in place, and institutions themselves need to have concepts. So schools, hospitals, workplaces need to know what they want to do when it gets really hot. And of course, there's the individual level. People can be informed and can adapt their behaviors in ways that decrease their risk for heat-related illnesses. So what's the status quo in Germany? It's not looking rosy. If you're looking at heat health action plans in Germany, there are only a few in place. And that is due to a number of reasons. So first of all, there is no law specifying that we need something like that. So there is unclear jurisdiction. People don't know, working in governments don't know who's in charge. Is it the state? Is it the municipality? That also causes a lack of funding and resources because it's not mandatory. And also, quite frankly, it hasn't been a priority. I feel like it's only been last summer, that it has really been an issue in the public space and has been put onto the agenda of decision makers as well. And what Klug has also seen while performing interviews and looking at those existing heat health action plans is that the healthcare professionals aren't really included during the planning and development stage. So that in turn then affects the effectiveness and implementation level. So we need healthcare professionals, we need the social sector on board, because who will then during a heat wave do stuff? I mean, they need to prepare, they need to be on board, they need to reach those populations, and they have the opportunity to reach them. But if we don't include them, they won't be really implemented. And the last point is that we don't have a monitoring system. So I spoke about the estimated deaths before, but those are really only modeled. In Germany, at least, we do not have a register that registers mortality, morbidity. So we don't really know the full extent of what is going on. So what do we propose? We propose local alliances. So we know the response to a heat wave needs a diverse set of stakeholders, and all of them need to come together and work together. So of course we have the municipality, we have their departments, their environmental departments, urban planning, but also their health departments. But we also need the practitioners. We need the medical doctors, nurses, pharmacists, we need midwives. Basically anyone can reach any sort of vulnerable population, and also civil society, and I will speak about that a bit later. And because we have to prepare ourselves for heat waves that we've never imagined before, never had before, also disaster management and emergency services need to be on board. So heat protection is really a joint task that will only work if all of those groups come together and work together and distribute the tasks. So one of the examples for an alliance like that is in Berlin. It was founded last year, and this is a project that I'm involved in with Klug. And it was an initiative by the Chamber of Physicians and the Berlin Senate, which is the state government, and of course our NGO. And the main idea was quite simple. We said, well, we as healthcare professionals, we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility towards our patients, towards general public as a whole, and we cannot wait any longer. So we're taking the initiative and we're going forward. And we basically divided the health sector into these 5 subgroups. We have inpatient care, hospitals, outpatient care, mainly family doctors, public health authorities, emergency services like paramedics, and the nursing sector, so care homes and mobile services. And in this alliance, all of these people, we came together. And one of the measures that was implemented last year was a warning cascade. So whenever the Senate of Berlin receives a heat warning, it forwards that to all of the institutions, healthcare facilities and practitioners in Berlin. And then those people in turn are supposed to put their protocols in place, their own concepts. And blueprints for these concepts were also co-developed within this alliance. So here on the right-hand side, apologies, it's in German, is a small example of one of those blueprints for those protocols and what to do during a heat wave. And measures can be quite different. You know, people usually think of those highly, costly building, you have to, I don't know, put in a shades or whatever, but there's also stuff that you can do very in the short term, like more on the organizational level, how you structure your day, that you don't have sort of physically straining activities during hours that are quite hot, more in the morning. If you're GP and you have your own practice, you invite patients that are more at risk for heat-related illnesses in the morning instead of the afternoon. You provide more monitoring to those that are in a hospital that are at risk, et cetera, et cetera. And another part was the training aspect, because really planetary health as well as heat are not yet fully implemented in all of the curricula. So we made short videos about heat and health, about preventative measures, and accompanied those with little posters that one could print out and just, tape to the wall or whatever, and have them as a reminder. And this was the first summer, so of course we're not at a point where every hospital, every care home, every doctor's office whatsoever has a plan in place yet, but it's on the agenda. People have been sensitized for the issue. There is an awareness, and the city of Berlin is also now working on a complete comprehensive heat health action plan. Another example that I wanted to bring to you is the city of Leipzig. That's actually where I live. And this is a great example because in Berlin, we had support from the Senate, from the Chamber of Physicians, so quite, more powerful organization, I'd say, or institutions. In Leipzig, really, a heat health action plan was approved due to a civil society organization, due to our activists from Health for Future. And there are students, medical students, nursing students, medical doctors, physiotherapists, nurses, that all just come together and want to fight for our, planet. And they pushed for it. So in 2018, there was already a proposal for a heat health action plan that was rejected by the city council. They didn't want to do it. It wasn't, priority. But last year, Health for Future just, established rapport. They talked to people from the city council, from the local government, and, gave presentations about the issues. But they, most importantly, also organized 2 very big public events where they invited people from the city, from the health department, from the urban planning department, environmental department, but where they also invited the healthcare professionals, scientists, people from other cities that have heat health action plans in place, and just build a platform for discussion and exchange. And through that, they really established that good relationship with the city. And when they filed a second proposal, it was approved in the city council. So now they're developing a heat health action plan for 2023, and Health for Future is consulted as some sort of external expert, and they're integrated into the process. So, civil society can also initiate and push and advocate, even if there isn't some sort of development yet in place from the governments. And the final example is an example from another German city, the Heat Hotline Parasol. This isn't something where Klug or Health for Future has been involved in, but it's another great example for what civil society can do. So in that city, they implemented a hotline, which is a free of charge hotline that calls citizens during heat waves. And it's a special support for senior citizens that, might be alone and are not, just might be a bit frail. It was an effort by the elderly committee and the health department, but what is interesting is that this hotline is run by volunteers. So it's volunteers that call the citizens during heat wave and just check in and say, how you're doing, how you're feeling. This is what you can do to protect yourself. And this is important because what we saw in Berlin, because that alliance is an initiative from the health sector, so it's healthcare professionals, but we can't reach everyone. We're not yet reaching those that are socially isolated, those that are not in some sort of institution. And that's really where local community organizations can come in place and try to reach those that are, often maybe even forgotten, And maybe to kind of wrap this all up, climate change causes more frequent, intense, and longer heat waves. I spoke about the health risk and that it can be deadly even. And of course, I spoke about the health sector, but also civil society are so important in tackling this issue. So civil society can initiate change, can actively participate in measures on a local level, and are so important for reaching the ones that we cannot reach otherwise. And this is basically it, but I'm happy to answer questions, and I'm happy to go into a discussion with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So yes, are there any specific questions on this presentation? Yes, Elisa Vass.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm curious to ask about the slide where you have presented the effects of heat waves in terms of worsening mental health and increased aggressivity. Do you have data specific for children and young people, for instance, or how have you gathered this information?
Mm-hmm. So I'm not totally aware of data regarding especially youth. There are comprehensive reviews on the effects of heat and health, so done by the WHO, but also published by the Lancet, where they kind of look at all the data that is available and summarize it. And there are certain aspects to the mental health dimension. So what we do see is also related to climate change, conflicts rise, also the Syrian war. Climate change might have contributed, but you also see that the ones that already suffer from psychiatric disorders or depression or bipolar disorder, stuff like that, that they then see a worsening of their condition during heat waves and then need to be, in the worst case, even hospitalized to get treated for it. But there are various sort of explanatory mechanisms. I mean, these are epidemiological associations that you see, right? And one of the explanations on a pathophysiological level has to do with neurotransmitters in the brain and the way that they are altered and during heat waves, but also that you know, certain medication that you take also prone to heat. But I'm really not aware of data for children specifically, but you might have a look into the WHO or Lancet stuff about heat, and there might be some sort of more in-depth info.
Thank you.
Any other question?
So thank you very much. Then we have already reached the last 15 minutes of our conference. So then I suggest that we have first a short presentation from Elisa Vaz, and she will talk about the youth policy group, and there will be about the connections between YMCA and the concept of planetary health in the context of this youth policy group. And then at the end, we will have again time to ask questions if there are any. So please, Elisa, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentations held so far. We, together with Hannah, I think we have identified multiple connections with our work, especially in terms of community well-being and sustainable planet. But first of all, what is YPG? So our group focuses mostly on building and promoting policy and advocacy work at the level of at the European level in terms of YMCA, and we are present in different formal and informal settings. We also consult with the executive committee of YMCA Europe, with YMCA movements at the national and international level, and with different youth organizations. We also participate in different European high-level meetings or specific conferences taking place. What we are mostly focused on right now are the 4 pillars of Vision 2030. So community well-being, meaningful work, sustainable planet, and just world. The connection with the topic for today, which triggered a lot of interest, I think, for all the participants, is especially in terms with the connection with community well-being and sustainable planet. And in this case, what we have done in the previous years was to take part in different meetings and platforms related, for instance, to biodiversity or at circular economy, sustainability at the level of the European Union, but also in meetings related to mental or well-being of young people. For instance, last year, we have also produced a report where we have looked upon the impact of the pandemic on young people and youth workers in terms of digital inclusion, digital safety, and digital well-being. So while that report was mostly focused on digital issues, we also had a question introduced in the research and asking young people where they see, for instance, the connection between the digital issues and climate change. And many of them have supported the idea that they need to increase their competencies and levels of understanding of different digital tools in order to become more aware of what's going on in terms of sustainability and climate change. So this concept of planetary health is relatively new to our group, to the youth policy group, but we are very interested to deepen our knowledge and to identify spaces to grow our expertise in this area, and to invite you to continue this communication with our members in order to increase the level of knowledge that we can also share during the debates and the platforms we are part of. And one example of a participation of last year, my colleague Hannah has was present in a dialogue with one of the European commissioners on environment, and that meeting was held online on the theme of biodiversity. So in conclusion, we are interested to find mostly the connection between community well-being and sustainable planet. And I think what you have presented in terms of planetary health can encompass a concept that brings together these two pillars of the Vision 2030 of YMCA.
Thank you very much, Elisa. Now, at the end of this conference, we would like to open up again for questions, maybe also overarching questions or links between the presentations. Maybe also you have some suggestions or ideas which could be discussed in this meeting. Yes, the idea is now to have more or less 10 minutes of questions and discussions before closing the meeting. Thank you very much, and yeah, whoever wants to start. It's Patricia Pelton.
Hi, just a quick comment to Eliza. In terms of focusing the work of planetary health and stating that it really impacts the two levels of our Vision 2030 of community well-being and sustainable health, I would actually say it brings in all four of them. So meaningful work is just, so in my province of Alberta, where we were impacted, have been impacted, are impacted by tremendous heat and storm systems, we still have many, many people who make a livelihood in the oil and gas industry. And our Prime Minister is trying to help these people think about a just transition, and he even has a policy on just transition to try to get them more involved in more sustainable work. The pushback is very, very hard for from these people. And it seems to be very hard. It's their livelihood. They've got mortgages, they've got this, they've got that. So anything that we can do to help these folks transition and see the value of transitioning. And I guess it goes back to Dr. Abshagen's response to my question. It's really important because these people are feeling very left behind and very threatened. And also in terms of just world, we can see again from Dr. Abshagen's charts that the climate crisis is totally unjust. So there's lots of injustice. So I would say that all of the work that we're doing could come under the umbrella of planetary health. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I can add something. Thank you. Thank you for the comment. Indeed, you are right. All the four pillars connect very well with this concept. And I was also thinking during the first presentation when it was mentioned the social transition, the social equity issue in this case, and the connection with the first question you have addressed. Why do people in general do not understand that we have to act upon what is happening? For instance, one of the reasons we have seen among young people is related to the costs. So acting on climate change right now, it's very expensive, especially for young people. And maybe in this case, I would address a question on the interventions that have been mentioned on health. How do you convince the decision makers, especially because the budgets, the public budgets are where we actually have the necessary funding to intervene. We as we as civil society, of course, we have the tools to support what is going on in the society, but it's again about the collaboration with the decision makers. So how do you frame this dialogue in order to gather to grasp the support of the decision makers and let them know that this is an important issue that should be acted upon right now and not in the future, for instance?
I'm happy to speak from the heat perspective. So various points that I want to briefly brush upon. So first of all, the costs of climate change are actually a lot higher than, you know, compared to now doing something now. If we look at heat, actually in Germany, God, I hope this number I remember correctly, we lose productivity. So this is also quite a, you know, if you want to argument on a more of a financial level, people are less productive and get sick. So this is actually workforce that is missing. So one study estimated, I think 40 million euros lost per heat day in Germany. So you could kind of argue on a financial level saying, you know, the costs are a lot higher if we don't do anything at all. But regarding the stuff that we did last year was really saying or highlighting that there are measures that you can take that are not expensive, that are more on organizational structural level that you can implement in your usual work days, and that of course don't need as much money. But the entire issue of budgets, of resources, I mean, it's applicable to any sort of issue. It's always something that people say, oh, we don't have the money, we don't have the resources, there's no one that can do it. So we kind of really try to, well, call for that, you know, the responsibility that people have, and kind of also the ethical kind of dilemma. But yeah, it's kind of, I don't think there is like a golden solution that works for everyone. And you really kind of just have to see what kind of works with the person that you talk to, whether they're more, you know, prone to like this financial, more to the ethical kind of sort of way of argumenting.
Mr. Abshagen, would you like to add something to this?
No, I'm completely with Natalie. I think first thing is to know the motivation of the people you speak to, and then try to find your arguments on be it financial, ethical, or so on. Then it is really you have to understand regional or national politics. I think if I may, just from Switzerland, it's quite a liberal country, so we have a scattered health system. For instance, there won't be solutions like, I don't know, if the NHS, the National Health System of England, is like really a role model, and like I think Natalie, we both are really looking there, and it's great what they do, but they are state organized. It's one single purchasing entity. If they apply a strategy, it holds through for the whole UK. And in Switzerland, every hospital has its own strategy, and there's 26 cantons, and every canton does a bit on its own. So it's completely different in which political system, regional system it is. The strength is that in Switzerland we have much direct democracy, and in the canton of Basel-Stadt right now there has been an initiative, a referendum for having Basel climate neutral by 2030, which didn't get adopted, but there was a counter proposal by the government to have this done by 2037, and now suddenly, so this has been voted upon and accepted, and now it comes into strategies of hospitals, because the canton the hospitals are owned by the canton, and now we have to have suddenly there is a boost in those strategies. I guess again, yeah, it's about civil engagement. It's really taking the role of, yeah, at least voting, but there's so much more to do. But there's not one general recipe that works all over the world the same way. Otherwise, we would have solved the problem already long time, I guess.
Thank you very much. Ed, I'm not sure if this was a question or a reaction. Do you have a question, Ed, to pose?
No, I would like to comment on what Eliza said. If that's, can I, or is it out of order?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. At first I have to apologize that I came in later, so I missed the beginning, but I was triggered to say a few words by the question that Eliza raised, by how can we more influence the decision makers? And I just want to make a general remark, and that is that the future of the planet depends on the young people, the new generations. And what I observe is that decision makers are in many European countries, also from the younger generation, from the populist side, and they are climate change deniers. So there is a lot of work to do in terms of public relation, in terms of let the facts speak, and let young people convince the decision makers. And then it's not about the European Commission or any umbrella organization. It's at a local level. Every so many years, there are elections at all levels. And when you talk about the role of the YMCA or any other youth organization, that is to raise the awareness with the young people at any level and try to influence and let the facts speak for any decision maker at all levels, because then you can bring a movement into the decision-making process where integration. I worked all my life in environment and water management issues. And what I hear is not new for me. It's put under another umbrella. But the mechanisms are exactly the same. You need to influence decision makers. And where does it start? And what are the arguments to convince? That's what I wanted to comment on Eliza's remark. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. I would also like to ask a question, and it goes into the direction. What do you think, Natalie and Christian Abshagen, Natalie Nielsen and Christian Abshagen, what would you like the YMCA as a movement to do, to act on, as a possible, I don't know, as another actor, as a possible partner, as a network which is locally rooted, but also well structured internationally?
I don't mind.
Yeah.
I feel like YMCA could have various sort of roles that it could play, of course, you know, like, once again, speaking from the HEAT perspective, they could work on a local level to initiate change, you know, kind of like make events, as I mentioned, like the Health for Future group did, and that really then push the decision makers of that city to do something. They could be reaching the vulnerable populations, but more importantly also would be the issue of mitigation, really. I mean, like, HEAT is more at the adaptation level, but any sort of efforts that go into mitigation from any sort of group, you know, the more the better, really. The more people or the more organizations are on board and tackle environmental issues, the better. And I'm not familiar with, you know, all your activities on the level, so I'm quite, you know, not the best person to propose concrete stuff, but you know, just check whatever you have in place where you can integrate maybe also the concepts.
Yeah. Well, it's a bit of a shame I don't know your organization too well neither, but from what I think I know, or where I'm quite on a safe ground, well, first you are an international organization. You are almost everywhere on the world, and I think this offers a great opportunity to share best practices or share really also, I don't know, frightening examples, bringing those dramatic events even in Alberta. Now we heard at other places. I think having original voices speaking them at other corners of the world is always something different than having it more indirectly. So profit from the global network you have, then from what I see here now, even only from the setup of this group here. Apparently you are a youth organization, but it's not only youth, or if you once entered there, then some of you stay or are still connected, and you have professions, you have a professional role, you have the network there, so connect there, bring this in, because I think it's so much intergenerational, but we don't have to separate old from young, or probably I belong already rather to the old side, but so it's about just having the people with the right mind and together, and I think this is a strong asset you can leverage as well. The second point, the third point is to join and go in alliances, maybe which are surprising and not known, but I think this is like a Fridays for Future, the Health for Future. I don't know where you, so because you are maybe presumed that rather old standing with a long history, a youth organization, and many in the field are younger ones, so that could be a part as well. And then maybe looking into the round as well, I don't know about your setup, but what we haven't spoken yet so much, it's about social justice in an intergenerational justice, but it's also about gender justice and gender equality, and especially in the global south and where you are present, I think there's a great bit in empowering especially women, girls to because I can say as a man, I think if we had a more equal societies in this regard as well, some of our problems wouldn't be so pressing as they are. So just some more generic hints.
Thank you very much for this very lively discussion, and a huge thank you to all who presented. It really means a lot to us that so many people presented and participated. So many thanks. We would like to stay tuned on this topic, and it would be great to see new initiatives on this important issue. If you have ideas, want to take new initiatives, have feedback, please do not hesitate to contact us or YMCA Europe staff. Now we wish you all a great evening and have a nice weekend, and hopefully we will see you soon. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.